All right. So we got through what I was calling the verses 2 through 20, because the first verse is just a God said to Moses kind of thing. It tells you that we're starting a new section in what we're reading. It's a literary thing. So we summed up verses 2 through 20, and that took quite a bit of time. I just rambled on about lots of things because important things that anyone can learn is the idea of just personal holiness. And that's what this entire chapter is about. So went through we went through systematically through verses 1 through 21, and then I stopped and went through this breakdown of, or this summation of 1 through 21, I mean 20. And so our verse 21, for those of you who have forgotten by now, it said, the guilty will be brought to Yahweh, to the entrance of the Ohel Moed, the tent of meetings, with a ram for his guilt. And so I asked the question, as we started this whole summation thing, guilty of what? Guilty of what was just in the verse that preceded it, or guilty of any of these things that precede it? Will it apply to anything that is after it? Okay. In Western literature, we tend to look at things like this as this connected to the verse that preceded it and disconnect it from everything else. Well, the only way that you disconnect in biblical Hebrew is to have a sentence that says something like, and God said to Moshe, blah, blah, blah. You have to have something like that for the subject to change. Otherwise, you're on the same subject no matter what is said that seems very unrelated. There is a relationship to it. So guilty of any of these 20 things that precede it. And what we're going to see is that it's guilty of any of the things that follow it. Just because it's in the center does not mean that it does not connect to the entire subject. It does. But the reason why it's where you find it, because we would think, well, why wouldn't you put that at the end, so that it's clear that everything, well, it's by association. Now, the previous verse spoke about somebody having an affair, right? And then it said, bring the guilty. So there's an association with, among the things that we've learned, this is very egregious. So we're going to point out that this is what you do when somebody's guilty. But again, that doesn't mean it only connects to the verse preceding it or to all of the verses preceding it and disconnect from the ones following it. No, it goes everywhere. It's just in this style of writing, this Mesopotamian style of writing, which we now know beyond any doubt is where this comes from. Moshe and all of those people were from the area of Mesopotamia. All of those people descended from that area. Just if you don't understand that, go read a little bit about Father Abraham and where he lived, where he grew up. That's the heart of Mesopotamia. So all of this Jewish culture came out of Mesopotamia. The writing style is identical to that of the writing style of Mesopotamia. If you want more information on how I know that and how I can say that it's proven beyond a doubt, look up Umberto Cassuto, Moshe Umberto Cassuto. He went into great detail about that and proved it beyond a shadow of a doubt. So anyway, now that we know that this rule about what happens under these circumstances applies to all of this stuff, let's just quickly go through this personal holiness thing. It started off in verse 2 telling us to be holy. So that sets the tone. Well, what do we do to be holy? Well, first off, you reverence your mother and your father and the Shabbat. Well, then that makes the mother the most important, the father the next important, and the Shabbat the third in line in importance. No, Hebrew does not work that way. That is a Western construct. Not one is more important than the other. They don't put them in order of importance. They don't put anything in chronological order. That simply does not exist in any biblical text, because that idea, that concept did not exist in the biblical period among the Jews. All right, that's a Western thing. So the mother is not more important than the father, and the father more important than the Shabbat. That simply isn't how it goes. They're all just as important. You have to reverence your mother, your father, and the Shabbat, the Sabbath. Then you are not to bow down your heart or your body to idols, and you're not allowed to make 3D images. And I say it that way so that you understand what the Hebrew is talking about. It's not, if it's three-dimensional, if it can cast a shadow, then it's three-dimensional, which is why coins were such a gray area for Jews, and have been from the beginning. Because once they got to the point where they could stamp somebody's face into a coin, then the argument becomes, well, that casts a shadow, so it must be three-dimensional. Well, technically it's not, it's two-dimensional, but that's why it became such a gray area. Well, we have to have the coins in order to buy stuff and sell stuff. And so when you went to, let's say, the temple, when it was built in the first century, or when it was fully functional in the first century, I should say, the Jews would bring Roman coinage, or Italian, if they happen to be there from a very long distance, which they did do that. Then they would go to money changers, and the money changers would exchange those coins for silver. And then those people could purchase, because if you come from a long enough way, if you come across the ocean or something like that, you may not be able to bring a couple of goats and a bull and whatever. So it's better just to come with the money, buy it while you're there. And of course, the Jews had all of that set up so that you could do things like that. And then again, if you lived in the city and you didn't have animals, well, how do you bring a lamb? You go to the temple, you exchange the money, you use the temple money to purchase your lamb or whatever it is that you have to pigeon. I mean, it was a lot of different things, right? So, and it was because it was a gray area. So, and it is gray because it's not three-dimensional. It really isn't. You don't see the backside of that, whoever's on the front or whatever, an animal or a human or whatever of the images you're not allowed to have, because you can have three-dimensional images. You can have a car, you can have a house. Nobody ever has debated that. There was no reason to, because we knew that there was a list of three-dimensional images that we couldn't have: things that fly in the sky, things that walk or crawl or slither on the ground, and things that swim, crawl, or slither under the water, in or under the water. It's that simple. So if you had images like that on your coinage, just to kind of stick with tradition, Dawn and I have a bucket outside of our house, and anytime we get change, we put it in the bucket. Well, what if someone comes and steals it? Well, so what's going to be in there? $2-3? I mean, it's not a big deal. But we do that just as a tradition thing. It's kind of fun, and you guys could do something like that and keep these evil coins out of your house. But that's, again, it's a gray area. Some rabbis are going to do the thing we call binding and loosing, and they're going to say, yeah, you can have the coins in your house, and some are going to say no. And that's okay. Whoever you're sitting under, if he says that's the way it is, well, then you're obligated by the Bible to live accordingly. Anyway, I don't have a problem with it. You can do what you want. You can have them in your house or not. We think it's more fun to have the little pot outside and put our money in it. Anyway, then that's coinage. Dollar bills are not three-dimensional in any way, shape, or form. So those stay in our wallet. that kind of stuff. All right, so you got that. Well, the other thing I was going to say, by the way, kids' toys, little Barbie dolls and GI Joe dolls and stuffed animals, those are in fact three-dimensional images. So there is no binding or loosing here. The Bible says you can't have them. So that's between you and your kids, you and your grandkids. Our grandkids know they can't bring that stuff into our home. They know that. Now, have they ever slipped them in? Yes, especially in their younger years. But for the most part, we've not had that stuff in our home because God disallows it. All right. And so then it's interesting that God is telling us to make peace sacrifices. And those are for us. They're for our benefit, not God's. I think that's wonderful. And then, of course, God says you can eat it on the first and second day, but on the third day, you have to get rid of it. And then if you don't, your sacrifice came to nothing and you have now committed a sin. So you're going to do that. You better do it right. What else do we have here? It takes us down here. You shall not reap the corners of your field. You shall not pick anything that fell, anything that was missed while you were harvesting. And remember, I pointed out that that's not just for farmers. That's the example is given of farmers, but that doesn't mean that's all it is. There is a part of you make that needs to be given to the poor, whether you're a farmer or not. And then, of course, I can't think of anything there. So if you're actually are a farmer and any of that stuff falls to the ground, or you realize you forgot to, harvest that one last tree, you're not allowed to. That needs to stay with the poor people. Then dealing with proselytes and strangers, you're not supposed to steal, you're not supposed to deceive or deal falsely with a proselyte. And again, and I pointed it out several times, the Jews were never under any obligation to, when the Nazis came in and said, hey, do you have any kids hiding in the floorboard or, under the floor or in the wall or something? The Jews were never under any obligation to point those children out. They were not. So this is proselytes. These are people who are, basically trying to live the same life that you're living. You shall not deal falsely with a proselyte and swear to God by or in God's name. You have to be honest. And then let's see. You cannot treat your close friend unjustly. You can't plunder those things that are your close friends. You cannot hold back a laborer's pay. You can't marginalize the deaf. And those are people who either literally can't hear or just can't hear the truth about God's word. Both fall under that category. You can't put a stumbling block in front of the blind, whether they're physically blind. That would just be awful to, put in front of somebody who can't see you to trip over. That'd be terrible. But that's also people who are blind. They read their Bible and by gosh, they know what they're talking about. And, Jesus was obviously a Roman citizen. I mean, look at every painting you've ever seen. He was Anglo-Saxon. Somehow he doesn't look like a Jew at all. And you can't explain that to some people. Well, they're blind. So you can't put a stumbling block in front of them. So, for those who would ask, well, why don't Jews go out and proselytize the world? Because some of the things that we would say would be a stumbling block, saying that Christianity is a false religion. is a stumbling block. I mean, if it's a bunch of Jews sitting around that believe that, saying that in a private conversation, that's one thing. But saying that in front of a non-Jew, particularly a proselyte who's trying to convert, you don't know where they are in this whole thing. You don't know if they're fully sold out to this thing. So you got to be careful about what you say in front of people like that. And so that's just one of those things. We don't want to give them a stumbling block. When people are truly interested and truly want to know, you'll be able to tell the difference, and you can open up and talk to them about things like that. All right, let's see. You are not allowed to do anything unjust. You won't give special treatment to someone just because they're poor. You won't show favoritism because someone's rich. You're just not allowed to do any of those things. You can't participate in the spreading of slander and gossip, which are the exact same thing biblically. You can't defend somebody who's guilty. You can't defend their guilt. You can be an attorney and defend someone who's guilty. You can do that. But what you can't do is if somebody's guilty of something, you can't defend what they did, right? You shall not hate your Torah observant brother in your heart. That it is so, so important, because you hear that's one of the big things with Christianity, is that you're not allowed to hate anybody. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Somebody rapes and murders your child, you're allowed to hate that person. That person is not your brother. I don't care if that person is born and raised Jewish and all that other stuff. He's obviously not Torah observant. You can hate that person. And how do I know this? Because we are created in the image of God, and God hated the one and loved the other, right? Anyway, so it's nonsense to say that we can't hate. We are allowed to hate. The downside to hate is that it does more damage to us than it does to the one we hate. Just saying. You can't hold a grudge against any of your people. We can hold a grudge against the Nazis. I don't know what good it do us now. They're all gone. But, you can't hold it against your people. All right, let's see. You shall guard God's ordinances. By the way, that's not the 10 Commandments. That's all the other laws that are connected to the 10 Commandments. You shall not crossbreed your livestock. You shall not plant different kinds of seeds together. You can plant different things in your field, but you can't plant the seeds together. I don't know why. God sometimes just doesn't give us an answer, and that's good enough for me. And so if an affair occurs between a woman and a man, the betrothed woman, now she's not married, she's engaged, but biblically speaking, once she's engaged, she had to, back in the old days, she had to actually get a divorce. And there are some parts of Judaism that still do this to this day. You can become betrothed and then decide you don't want to get married. Well, now you actually have to go to divorce court. And that's the way it was in the Bible times. And there is some of that still going on to this day, right here in America. Yep. It's the Orthodox Jews that still follow that. I'm not sure I would agree with that approach, but that's the way it was back then. And so if the man wouldn't release her, then the punishment of what was called death biblically, nobody was going to be put to physical death. Death back in the Bible days, and according to the Bible, death, and that would be death. But the biblical death was to be cut off from your family, your country, your culture. That's what they called death. So, in fact, stoning wasn't people throwing stones at you. It was your name and your thing that you did bad being chiseled. It was turned off. It was turned off.
Hello.
Okay. Were we switching over or what?
No, I was just trying to finish.
Oh, okay. Anyway, I am going to have to cut it short. I do apologize. I am physically having an issue and I'm going to have to run as fast as I can, which would only be in my mind since I can't. I'm going to have to waddle as fast as I can. So sorry about that. But we'll pick up at 22 next week and hopefully we'll maybe get a few things figured out. Shalom, shalom, everybody.
The blessing, vaYiqra. Yavarecha Yahweh v'yish merecha. Ya'er Yahweh panai v'lecha v'hunecha. Yisa Yahweh panai v'lecha v'yasem lecha shalom. And in English, may Yahweh cause you to lie down so that you may rest. May he touch and caress you. May he prepare you for what is ahead. May he watch over you. May he keep you from harm. May he cause goodness to grow in you and take away the bad. May he arrange your life and cause you to flourish. May he cheer you up and gladden your heart. May he cause his light to shine through you. May he show you tenderness, favor, and love in his presence. May he show you kindness and be delicate towards you. May he show you his generosity, mercy, compassion, and desire for you as it comes forth from the depths of his soul. May he lift you out of your pit and deliver you from the things that hold you prisoner. May he draw you to his chest and cast his eyes on yours. May he show you his love and desire for you as he cradles you in his arms. May he bear your punishment and pardon you of your sin. May he take you for his bride. May he establish a foundation in you. May he place his name on your heart and mind and make your body his temple. May you be his treasure. May you always be on his mind. May he draw you near and comfort you when you are afraid. May he assure you there is nothing to fear because he is with you. May you and all that concerns you be at peace because he is your friend. Amen.